Hi everyone, welcome to this video where we will learn about how to get started with serverless using AWS Lambda. My name is Aishwarya Sood. I am 3x AWS certified. I am working as a lead coach in the AWS domain and I am also an AWS Academy accredited educator. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. The profile name is given here, and also you can scan this QR code to directly view my profile. So in today's video, what we will be talking about, we will start with the very basic of what exactly is serverless, what does it mean, and how we can get started with serverless using AWS Lambda, how the Lambda works, and what are the three different ways of running a Lambda function, what are Lambda layers, what's an anatomy of a Lambda function, what are the best practices that can be followed, and how to write our first Lambda function. Okay, so let's begin with our video for the first topic for today with the serverless introduction. So what does serverless exactly mean? It's a native architecture of the cloud that enables you to shift more operational responsibilities to AWS, which can increase the agility and innovation. So it's a kind of a way to build and run the applications and servers without thinking about service. It doesn't mean that the servers won't be there. Okay, serverless doesn't mean that the servers won't be there. Servers will still be there, but the thing is that you won't be thinking about servers. You won't be setting up the servers. You won't be setting up the underlying infrastructure. It will be available to you and it will be taken care by AWS itself. It enables you to build and run the applications and services without thinking about the servers, and the application will still on the servers, of course. But as I said, AWS will do all the server management tasks such as server or cluster provisioning, patching, operating system maintenance, and also the capacity provisioning. Also, serverless lowers the TCO that will be there, because by using a serverless architecture you can focus on your core product, and this reduces the overhead, enables which enables you to reclaim time and energy which you can spend on developing the products that scale and are reliable. And finally, serverless architectures enable you to build the microservices applications that we will learn how. Okay, and the few benefits that are there for the serverless architectures, first is that there is no infrastructure provisioning to that means there will be no infrastructure to provision, no infrastructure to management, because the underlying infrastructure will be taken care by AWS itself. What you have to do, you just have to select a few things and the infrastructure, the servers that will be there will be ready for you. Also, the automatic scaling is there, which means it automatically scales by unit of consumption, like it scales by unit of work or consumption rather than by the server unit, and you pay for the value. In the serverless, this is a pricing model, pay for value. You pay only for the duration that a resource runs rather than by the server unit. Okay, so basically only for when there's a request and your compute capacity is being used, you will be paying only for that. Not like EC2 that your server is running, you have to pay. No, only when there's a request and your compute capacity gets used, you just have to pay for that, and they are highly available and secure because there will be built-in availability and fault tolerance. You don't need to architect for availability because it will be built into the service itself. Okay, AWS offers various technologies for running code, managing data, and integrating the applications, all without managing the servers. Serverless technologies feature automatic scaling, built-in high availability, fault tolerance, and also a pay-for-use billing model to increase the agility and optimize the cost. And these technologies also eliminate the infrastructure management tasks like capacity provisioning and patching, so you can focus on writing the code that serves your customers. And serverless on AWS is built around two compute services, which is AWS Lambda and AWS Fargate, and there are serverless services available for integration and data stores as well. Also, for developer tools, we have got a few serverless options, which include AWS SAM, that stands for Serverless Application Model, which is an open source framework for building serverless applications, and it provides shorthand syntax to express functions, APIs, databases, and also the event source mappings. Another thing that we have got is CDK, which stands for Cloud Development Kit, which is an open source software development framework to define your cloud application resources using familiar programming languages. And then we have got serverless framework, which is a third party one, and this consists of an open source CLI and a hosted dashboard. Together they provide you with full serverless application lifecycle management. If you use all of them, you will be getting fully serverless options. Okay, and now proceeding towards the other serverless offerings, AWS has a lot of offerings that you can use to build the serverless architectures on AWS. You might have idea about a few of them, or maybe you are a beginner, but in this session we will be focusing on AWS Lambda majorly by discussing the various features of it and the working of it. So let's start discussing the AWS Lambda now. So Lambda is a fully managed compute service that runs your code in response to events and automatically manages the underlying compute resources for you. As I said, it is serverless, so that's obvious, and it runs your code on a high availability compute infrastructure and performs all the administration of the compute resources, including the underlying operating system configuration, the server configuration, the maintenance, capacity provisioning, etc. Also, it executes the code at the capacity as and when you need it, and that's what we mean by serverless. As we have seen earlier, it will only run when there's a request, and other times it won't do anything and you don't have to pay for its idle time. Lambda natively supports a few programming languages which you can see on the screen, and also the custom runtimes are also possible. Like if you can't find your preferred programming language to be selected in the Lambda, you can also use a custom runtime by implementing an AWS runtime in any programming language. You can include this runtime in your functions deployment package. Apart from this, we have got something known as environment variables. You can use them to adjust your function's behavior without updating the code. An environment variable is a pair of strings that is stored in a function's version specific configuration. Also remember that we can have different versions for our Lambda function. So Lambda runtime makes environment variables available to your code and sets the additional environment variables that contain the information about the function and the invocation request. The total size of all the environment variables should not exceed 4 KB. That's the limit for this. Another limit that there is the maximum function timeout. So the maximum timeout for a Lambda function is 15 minutes, which means a Lambda function can run for a max of 15 minutes and not more than that. If you have something which takes more than 15 minutes to process, you can look for other options like Amazon EC2. Another amazing feature that we have got with the Lambda is Lambda at Edge. It's a feature of Amazon CloudFront that enables you to run the code closer to your users of the application, which improves the performance and also reduces the latency. It runs your code in response to the events that are generated by CloudFront Content Delivery Network. And for the Lambda function metrics, you can go ahead and check out in the CloudWatch. When your function finishes the processing of an event, it will send the metrics about the invocation to the Amazon CloudWatch. So these are the few basic things to get you started with the Lambda. We will dive a little deeper into it in the further slides. Now, how to run a Lambda function? I told you that these are the things that are there in Lambda and these are the features of it. But how do we run a Lambda functions? So there are 3 different ways of invoking a Lambda function. Let's learn about all of them one by one. First option that will be there is the event sources, that an event can trigger an AWS Lambda function. So this is the first way of how a Lambda function will run. It integrates with other AWS services to invoke the Lambda functions, which is nothing but a custom code that you write in one of the languages that Lambda supports. And you can configure the triggers to invoke a function in response to The resource lifecycle events respond to incoming HTTP requests or consume events from a queue or run on a schedule. An event source is the entity that publishes the event to the Lambda, and your Lambda function processes the event, and Lambda runs your Lambda function on your behalf. So here the event source can be anything like Amazon S3 bucket or DynamoDB table or something. Now consider an example use case for an event based Lambda function. Suppose that you want to create a thumbnail for each image that is uploaded to an S3 bucket. So to build this solution, you can create a Lambda function that Amazon S3 will invoke when objects are uploaded. Then the Lambda function reads the image object from the source bucket and creates a thumbnail image in the target bucket. Here's how it works. You can see on the screen. First, a user will upload an image to the source bucket in Amazon S3. Amazon S3 detects that the object created event, that the object has been uploaded to this bucket. Then S3 publishes the object created event to the Lambda by invoking the Lambda function and passing the event data. And then the next thing is that Lambda runs a Lambda function by assuming the execution rule that you specified when you created the Lambda function, because it needs some permissions to do the further processing. And based on the event data that the Lambda function receives, it knows the source bucket name and the object key name so that it can read the appropriate object. Then Lambda function will read the object and will create a thumbnail by using graphics libraries, and then saves the thumbnail to the target bucket. This is a event source, like how a Lambda can be triggered through an event. Okay, another we have got is scheduled based. So this is a second way of running the Lambda function. Consider an example use case for a schedule based Lambda function. Say that you are in a situation where you want to reduce your Amazon EC2 usage. You decide that you want to stop the EC2 instances at a predefined time, for example at night when no one is accessing them, and then you want to start the instances back up in the morning before the workday starts. So in this situation, what you do, you could configure AWS Lambda and Amazon CloudWatch events to help you accomplish these actions automatically. So here is what will happen in all of these steps that you can see on the slide. A CloudWatch event will be there, which is scheduled to run a Lambda function to stop your EC2 instances at, let's say, for example, 10 p.m. every night. Okay, you have created a CloudWatch event which will trigger the Lambda function at 10 p.m. Then the Lambda function is triggered and runs with the IAM rule, the appropriate IAM rule that gives the function the permission to stop the EC2 instances. Then the EC2 instances enter the stopped state because this Lambda contained the code to stop the EC2 instances. Next, later at, for example, 5 a.m. in the morning or maybe 8 a.m. in the morning, a CloudWatch event is scheduled again to run a Lambda function to start the EC2 instances. Okay, this is another CloudWatch event and this is another Lambda function which contains a code to start the Lambda functions. Then the Lambda function is triggered at that particular time which you have specified and runs with the IAM rule that gives it the permissions to start the EC2 instances. Then the EC2 instances enter into the running state. So this was based on a schedule. The Lambda ran on a particular schedule, not on the event based. Okay, in the previous one we saw it when an event happened on an S3 bucket, it triggered the Lambda. But here it was all based on a schedule that we defined. The next process, the next way to run the Lambda is through a manual option. So in the Lambda console, after you have authored your Lambda function, configured the test events and deployed the changes, you just need to click on the test option that will be there in the console. I will show you in the demo also. You just need to click on this test option and Lambda will be invoked. This is an option for testing the Lambda by running it manually. Okay, no event, no schedule, just running it when you want it. So now we have seen 3 different ways to run a Lambda function, but how do we actually create it? We have been seeing multiple things about Lambda, about how to run it, about what are the features of it, but how do we actually create a Lambda function? Let's have a look into this process. So when you create a Lambda function, you define the permissions for the function and specify which event trigger the function. You also create the permissions for the function and specify the appropriate permissions, and then you create a deployment package which will contain the application code and any dependencies and the libraries that are needed to run your code. And finally you configure the runtime parameters such as memory the memory timeout and the memory timeout and the concurrency. When your function is invoked, Lambda will run an environment based on the runtime and the configuration options that you selected. Okay, this will be done through the IAM role. This can be anything like S3 or DynamoDB or any other event that can trigger the Lambda. Then all the application code and dependencies, then the final configuration, that how long your Lambda should keep running, what is the maximum memory that you want to allocate. Also, apart from this, another important thing that you can remember, that you can configure a Lambda function to connect to a private subnet in the VPC in your AWS account, because by default a Lambda function doesn't reside in a VPC and it can't communicate to the private resources that are there in your VPC. It just talks to the public resources through the internet. But if you have a requirement that you want to connect your function to the VPC to access the private resources while the function is running, then you can add it into the VPC. For example, connecting Lambda to a EFS instance for mounting a permanent storage. This is just one example, but if there's any other use case also when you need your Lambda function to access the private resources, that will be the solution. You will have to add it into a VPC, create the appropriate security groups, add it to the subnets, and then you will be able to achieve that. So how does exactly a Lambda function look like and what are the necessary components of it? Let me tell you one by one. When a Lambda function is invoked, the code begins running at the handler. The handler is a specific code, method or a function that you create and include in your package. You specify the handler when you create a Lambda function, and each supported language has its own requirements for how a function handler can be defined and referenced within the package. After the handler is successfully invoked inside your Lambda function, the runtime environment belongs to the code that you wrote. So when it will be the Lambda will be invoked, it will first check out this handler, and whatever will be written in this handler, that will be running. And this handler always takes two objects. One is the event object, another is the context object. The event object provides the information about the event that triggered the Lambda function, and this event might be a predefined object that an AWS service generates, or a custom user defined object in the form of a string, the serializable string. Okay, and then the contents of the event object include all the data and the metadata that your Lambda function needs to drive its logic. For example, an event that is created by API gateway will contain the details that are related to the HTTPS request that was made by the API client. For example, the path, the query string and the request body. And let's say if any event is created by S3, that will include the details about the bucket and the object. And the context object, this is generated by AWS and will provide the metadata about the runtime environment. It enables your function code to interact with the Lambda runtime environment, and the content and the structure of the context object vary based on the language runtime that your Lambda function uses. However, at minimum, the context object will be including a few things like AWS request ID, which is used to track the specific invocations of a Lambda function, and then log stream name, which your log statements will be sent to in the CloudWatch, and then get remaining time in milliseconds. This method returns the number of milliseconds that remain before the running of your function times out. So these will be there always, at least they will be there, and apart from them multiple others also will be there. And this is how a basic Lambda looks like. Okay, the handler object, the handler is taking two objects, the event and the context, and this is just printing the hello world. Okay, so this is how the Lambda function looks like. Now we will see a quick demo and a quick walkthrough of the Lambda console, that how does it look like. So let's go to the AWS console and start the demo for Lambda. So here we go. First, what we have to do, just go to the Lambda and we will create a Lambda function in this. So this is how the Lambda console looks like. I need to click on create function and I will get all these options. First option that I have got is to either author from scratch, like if I want to write the Lambda function by myself, or do I want to use a blueprint from all the available options that are there. Then do I want to use a container image, or I can also browse through this repository, the serverless app repository, with a lot of sample Lambda functions. Okay, so for this demo, we will go ahead and author the function from scratch itself. The function name, let's give it as the demo function. Okay, then runtime. Here I select the programming language that I want for my Lambda function. So by default it is Node.js selected, but I'll go ahead with the Python. Here are the latest versions that are supported, and the previous ones are also listed here if you want your previous versions for any programming language, and you can also give the custom runtime. And then here is where you can define the permissions. So there are three options for defining the permissions. First is create a new role with the basic Lambda permissions, and the second is use an existing role. If you click on this, you can select an existing role that you have already created. If you click on create a new role, then you can give the role name and you can select the policy that you want. But if you click on the first option, create a new role with the basic Lambda permissions, then what AWS will do, they will create a role automatically for you with the basic Lambda permissions. What do I mean by the basic Lambda permissions? It will just include the permissions to write the logs to the CloudWatch. That's it. If you want more permissions, you can later add it the policy of that role and you will be good to go. Advanced settings you can define if you want your Lambda function to be in a network, or if you want to enable the code signing. Okay, then click on create function. That's it. This is how simple is that. The function will be created with just a few configurations. The function will be created now. So this is how the Lambda function console looks like. Okay, let me give you a brief walkthrough of this. So this is the code editor where you can write your code. Okay, right now I have got this code by default, which will if I test it out, it will say hello from Lambda. This is one option for writing the code for your Lambda function. Another option is to upload it. Okay, I can upload it as a zip file from my local system, or I can give a S3 URL in order to fetch the code from there. Okay, so this is the code editor. These are the another two options for uploading the code. Another thing, there I can do all the actions on my file that is there, and this is for testing out the Lambda function. If you remember, I told you that there's a manual way for running the Lambda function. This is what was that. Okay, I just need to click on test and my Lambda function will run. And deploy button I have got. If I make a change, let's say I just enter, okay, it will be enabled because according to it the change has been made. If I just press the backspace, this also is a change. So after every change I will have to deploy the function. This is just nothing but a save option. Okay, after you make any change, make sure you deploy it before you test it out. Okay, so apart from this, here are the code properties. Okay, what's the package size as of now? When did I last modify it? What are the runtime settings? Okay, that runtime is Python 3.9 and the handler is the Lambda handler that is there. Okay, this Lambda handler. The name of the handler is given. Then layers. Layers we are yet to learn in the PPT, so I'll tell you at that time. And here I can see more things. Okay, like if I go to the test, I will be able to create a few test events. Okay, if I go to monitor, I can view all the CloudWatch metrics that are there for my Lambda function. All the graphs will be opened like this. And apart from this, if I go to configuration, I get a lot of options here. Okay, the triggers, permissions, destinations, environment variables, tags, VPC, and a lot many things. So right now we don't need to discuss all of the options. If we later on do a deep dive of Lambda, then we can discuss all of them. But right now what I want to tell you, here is where I can edit the general configuration of my Lambda, that what should be the maximum memory allocated to my Lambda, what should be the maximum timeout. Remember, it can be a maximum of 900 seconds, which is nothing but the 15 minutes. Okay, I can also give a description to my Lambda function. Okay, then for permissions, right now what is the role that is associated? My Lambda function name, role, and a random string here. Okay, so if I click on this role, I'll be taken to the IAM roles page, and it will show me what are the policies given to there. And apart from this, environment variables, you can add here a key value pair can be added here. Instead of hard coding that into the function, it will take the value from the environment variable. Apart from this, that's it. Another thing that you can remember, that we can also have different versions of our Lambda function. Like right now I have something written in my Lambda function. If I make a change, I can deploy it as another version of my Lambda function, so that I have multiple versions accessible from the same place. Okay, so right now what I will do, I will give it a code which fetches the list of S3 buckets that are there in my account. Okay, I already have the code, so I'll just paste it here, and then I will give the appropriate permissions to it. Right now I have deployed it, and what do? If I click on test, it will ask me to give the name to a test event like this. Okay, so here I just need to give a test event name. You can edit the values if you want. Like if you want to test your Lambda with multiple values, you can give it here. Right now this is not necessary for my case, so I'm just adding it. I am just keeping it as it is. I click on create, and then I test it. What should it say? It will give me some error. Okay, because the access is denied as of now. I told you, right, that the basic Lambda permissions won't be including any other permission except the CloudWatch access to write the logs to it. So what we will have to do, we will have to give this Lambda the permissions to call S3 so that it can fetch all the bucket names list. Okay, for that I'll go to the IAM console. This is a role that has been associated to my Lambda function. I will just add an inline policy. Okay, so in inline policy, I'll select a service. For this, let me select the S3. Yes, S3, and what will be the actions allowed? Only the list I want, and list also just list all my buckets. That's it, no other actions are required. Then review policy. Okay, this is it. Policy, I will name it as sample only. Okay, sample, create policy, and this will be embedded into this particular role, the demo role that is attached to my Lambda function. So this is done. Now if I test it, it should give me the results. Yes, it has given me the results. That status code 200, that means the request was successful. What are the buckets that are existing in my AWS account? These all buckets. Okay, this means my Lambda is successful. It is successfully executed. Okay, so this was just one example. You can add whatever code you want. You can experiment with Lambda as and whatever you want with it. This is a nice service. Okay, so let's go back to the slides now. I hope you have got a good grasp of how does it work. Now let's understand a few things about the configuration and billing in the Lambda functions. So memory and timeout are the configurations that determine how your Lambda function performs. These configurations also affect your billing, and with Lambda you are charged based on the number of requests for your functions, and the price also depends on the amount of memory you allocate to your function, and the duration also for how long it was running. So for memory, you specify the amount of memory you want to allocate to your Lambda function. It then allocates the CPU power that is proportional to that memory, and it is priced so that the cost per 100 millisecond of a function duration increases as the memory configuration increases. For the timeout, You can control the maximum duration of your function by using the timeout configuration. You can set the timeout value for a function to any value up to 15 minutes, and when the specified timeout is reached, Lambda will stop the running of your Lambda function, and using a timeout can prevent the higher costs that come from long running functions. So there are a few best practices that can be followed with regards to the memory and timeout, which can help you save the costs. This includes testing the performance of your Lambda function to make sure that you choose the optimum memory size configuration. You can view the memory usage for your function in Amazon CloudWatch logs, that how much maximum memory has it used, so that you can allocate the appropriate memory. Then you can also load test your Lambda function to analyze how long your function runs and determine the best timeout value. Is it running for just 3 seconds? Is it running for 10 seconds? Even under a load, how long does it run? So based on that, you can get that value and you can give the appropriate timeout value. And then talking about Lambda layers. So when you build serverless applications, it is common to have the code that is shared across Lambda functions. It can be some custom code that 2 or more functions are using, or a standard library that you add to simplify the implementation of your business logic. Previously, what you used to do, you packaged and deployed this shared code together with all the functions that used it. Now you can configure your Lambda function to include additional code and content as layers. So what exactly is a layer? It is a zip archive, .zip archive that contains libraries, a custom runtime, or any other dependencies. With Lambda layers, functions can share the code. Developers use layers to upload the code one time and reuse it multiple times. Basically, you will have a Lambda function, and additionally you will have a layer can be used with any Lambda function. Okay, this Lambda function that you have created, this will be just including the application code. Any dependencies or whatever is there, that you can add in the layer, and that layer will be used with any other Lambda function that requires those dependencies. So that's why with the layers, you can keep your deployment packages small, because the function will be just including the application code. The deployment package will be including just the application code, and the layers will be including any extra dependencies. And one person can be responsible for managing the core library, and maybe another person can be responsible for using and building on the top of the library code to build the application logic. This way the sharing code can be easier, and it can help promote the separation of responsibilities across the teams as well. Also, layers enable you to keep your deployment package small, but there are a few limits along with it. Each Lambda function can use up to 5 layers at a time, and the total unzipped size of the function plus all the layers can't exceed the unzipped deployment package size limit of 250 MB. Okay, this is an amazing feature with just a few limits. So this can be helpful for you. Now let's wrap up this session by discussing a few best practices that can be followed while working with the AWS Lambdas. So you can use environment variables to pass the operational parameters to your function. For example, if you are writing to an S3 bucket, instead of hard coding the bucket name you are writing to, you can configure the bucket name as an environment variable. Same goes for the database endpoints as well. And avoid using the recursive code in your Lambda function, wherein the function automatically calls itself until some arbitrary criteria is met. And this could lead to unintended volume of function invocations and escalated cost as well. Also, performance test your Lambda function, because it is a crucial part in ensuring you pick the optimum memory size configuration. Any increase in memory size triggers an equivalent increase in the CPU that will be available for your function. Then load test your Lambda function to determine an optimum timeout value, as I just explained you previously. Also, understand the resources and the operations your Lambda function needs, and limit the execution rule to these permissions only. Okay, remember the principle of least privilege that is there for the best practices in security, that we have to grant the permissions only that is genuinely required by somebody. Then payload size, file descriptors, and slash tmp space, and the invocations, the concurrency limits, the timeout value, then the maximum memory that you can specify. All these things have some limits, and also the layers. All these things have some limits which you need to be familiar with, whatever suits to your use case. You don't need to remember all the Lambda limits, but be familiar with the common ones so that you can work accordingly. Okay, and you can design all your Lambda functions and the configurations accordingly. So that's it for this video. I hope you have understood all about Lambda that we have seen today, and we will meet in the next video. Thank you.